So welcome to episode number 2 of the discussion on UNS with those guys here. David, Dion, welcome again.
Hi again.
This time we're going to talk about UNS in relation to SCADA. In the previous session, I think the major points we discussed is the misconception. We demystified UNS, I think. And we also, at least I learned, that yes, you need to have the end game in mind, but just start. And then not saying start small. No, you just start doing it. I think that's the... So today we're going to focus on the SCADA related UNS part. And Dion, if you look at SCADA, a statement I would like to put on the table is SCADA compliant with UNS? Does that question make sense?
Again, we go back to the thing, is a system compliant to UNS? I don't think such a thing exists. UNS is about accessing data. So when we go to the SCADA environment, we all grew up in the control area, and it's about the historical time series data that's in the SCADA. How do I get that to other people? And the UNS facilitates that mechanism. So is the SCADA system compliant to UNS? Yes, because it contains historical data that I can share with other systems.
Okay.
Yeah, and you might then, I think one of the differentiators might be is, will my SCADA system provide the context which I'm gonna send into my UNS and then consume in further applications downstream, or do I have a SCADA system which is still maybe a more old school environment, tag first, where you need to put some kind of a translation layer in between.
Yes. Yeah. I think you always will end up with some way of transforming and translating data sets from different systems. Because at the time when they built, some engineer decided this is the way the naming convention is going to be, and they built a new system, it could be completely different. So that translation layer will always be there, but the UNS facilitates that as well. And that's critical to understand, that it can be the translation layer.
And if I may, if we now, because in the previous episode we already said that it's not a product, so that means that if we can, I'd like to make it a little bit more concrete here. So suppose I have a SCADA system or I have multiple SCADA systems. Let's say preferably they are a bit different from each other, because as you said, one was bought 5 years ago, another one was bought 15 years ago. Anyways, so I have multiple environments. So if I now would like to build this UNS, if I want to build a centralized way for me to access that data, then it means that I need to put on top of those systems, I need to put this translation layer. And this is what we see happening right now in the industry. If you look to the I would say the data part of our industry, we see that there are lots of vendors, both the big ones as well as smaller ones. They are now offering this translation layer. Some are coming from the IT sides, so they have less knowledge about industrial protocols, but they do have more knowledge about, for example, cloud systems. Some come more from the traditional OT sides, and they are really, really capable in, I would say, ingesting all those crazy protocols we invented in the course of the last so many years. But it's now starts with that translation layer on top of your SCADA, and then you have to decide where the data goes to. That's another topic to discuss. But
and this translation layer, is that the same as during the first recording we did? We talked about this wrapper. Is that the wrapper we discussed in the first session, or is it a different animal?
I would say it is one of its capabilities.
Okay.
So doing the translation, doing the contextualization, maybe even doing some data processing. As an example, let's say you have high frequency vibration measurements running. You might decide you don't want to store 50 kilohertz data. So one of the capabilities indeed is the data pre-processing on the edge, data contextualization. But one of the other capabilities, and we can have a podcast only or a video only on the capabilities, and one of the other capabilities would be the data storage, the actual data storage. Another one would be the data access. So how do you access that data again and I would say use it then in further applications.
But I think what I was just saying is we have to remember what is a SCADA's task, if I can call it that way, is to control the process in a safe manner and give you visibility of what's happening in the process. It was never designed as a data sharing mechanism. Yeah, it contains volumes and volumes of data, but not all of that data is relevant to anybody else. It's there for a certain task. But what's now becoming, like David said, there's a layer on top of that to say there's so much relevant information in this layer that wasn't accessible before. How do I get it out?
Okay, so and let's assume in the audience there's going to be a lot of people viewing and listening to this that work in a plant, in a production facility. They have implemented SCADA 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Two questions to you, Deon. One, why should they implement UNS, if I can say it like that? And two, what would it bring them?
I think the why part is that there is a need, and we will talk in the future about that now, to analyze the data that sits there that hasn't been analyzed in the past. The Unified Namespace is a mechanism to expose those data sets to other systems that has the ability to analyze it.
Perfect.
That's one reason to do it.
Good. Yeah. And so that also includes then the benefit for
the benefit. Yes.
So it not only helps you today with some questions you have today in insights, it also allows you to start analyzing, getting multiple sources, talking the similar language, being accessible in the same way. Okay.
Because, as we are collecting, we're storing the data, we're visualizing it in the SCADA. The next layer is to make sure that that data is accessible and people can analyze it and then utilize that data and insights back into the SCADA control environment to people can run the plants better so you can get the benefits of more production or whatever the case may be.
And maybe to add to that, because so that's a very important point. In the previous episode, we talked about ISO 95 data contextualization. We talked about potentially integrating multiple data sources. Now, if you are about, for example, to introduce an MES layer, now how cool is that? That instead of, as part of your MES project, you now need to start building all those custom interfaces as we did in the past, because typically there would have been a part would be just custom interfacing. We would have started building your plant structure because you need that in your MES environment. So just if you would have that layer in place, and you would now go, it might be a small MES application, but let's take I would say the if we talk about other trends, composable MES, another trend, like small, templatized, very use case specific, not too much fast implementation, not too much hassle, not bespoke. If you can plug that on top of that set of capabilities, that translation layer, wow. Now that's an easy project.
So and easy always between brackets, I'm sure, but it's easier. The 60-70% of projects on MES that fail because of complexity. That's how you could overcome that.
The minimum thing you do is you reduce the risk. And the cycle and your total cycle time you do.
So is it fair then to state that UNS for SCADA on its own doesn't add that value, but it really adds value the moment you want to access the data, if you want to integrate systems, etc. So it is a step towards a completely open, accessible system. That's what I learned.
UNS to exchange data between two SCADA systems. Utilize the ability UNS to extract data from those systems to add value to the future that will benefit the business.
Perfect.
I think the big challenge that people always underestimate is about normalization of the data. Because at the lower end, we store it in a certain way, but when we analyze it, there's different normalization and timestamps available. And you have to be very careful that you don't fall into this trap of just try and combine data sets that doesn't have the same normalization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fair. So I've learned a lot. Again, thank you for that, guys. It's really, really helpful. So the first session, we talked about UNS in general. We kind of demystified it, Unified Namespace. Now we've looked at UNS in combination with SCADA, where I think the conclusion is very clear. In the next section, we will dive into that accessibility. That we will dive into how data ops and analytics can access that data in an easy, simple, straightforward way. So see you later on.
Thank you.